An asteroid core is on a collision course with Tessin 3. Alexander likes to go to the holodeck to fight his alien monsters. And Loxana Troy got Petrokian sausage when all she wanted was tea. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 5, Episode 20. This one is entitled The Cost of Living, written by Peter Allen Fields, directed by Weinrich Colby. This was April 18th, 1992. Where were you? We've got a very special guest today, everybody. This is going to be a fun one. It's going to be a deep dive. Our special guest today, can you guess? It's Chris Halstead. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's beautiful weather and a nice day to talk about something that happened a long time ago, but it was a fun experience.
I hope you remember it well.
I hope you remember it. It was a long time ago.
What
do you remember about it?
Well, it was actually a really unusual shoot. It was the fourth day of probably the heaviest rains that LA had had in 25 years.
Really?
And the Paramount lot was flooded. It's an easy day to remember. You couldn't get in the lot off of Melrose. There's 2 feet of water everywhere. And
so this mud bath was actually in the parking lot.
You know what? They built that all up elevated because everywhere else, there were times walking around, you were walking through the decks, hallways of the Enterprise, and there was 3 inches of water everywhere. There were rivers running in the sets of the ship. They had apple boxes and sandbags. Remember sandbags holding up cabling? And I remember coming around one corner and looking down a hallway and seeing kind of this river of water floating on a starship and thinking, well, that isn't good. That or in outer space, that is just such not a good thing.
Wow. They were going through a real life Star Trek episode while they're filming a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, and I remember arriving, and I was going in, and Marina and John Franks were heading out, and you could tell it was a rough set. In that rough getting on there, rough, tough, and I think they had done all their filming and were heading out, and you got the feeling you get there sometimes when the set's really congested and rushing that the rain had put them behind, and it did a lot. And this episode gets comments a lot of times that people say, well, it's a little disjointed, or we ended up on a long shot there or whatever, and Jump seemed to cut this, and they were cutting a number of scenes as they were running out of time.
Wow.
Because we're flooding, and when Winrich, I think he was the director. He did things like McCloud and Movies of the Week and kind of standard stuff. Big establishing shot, tight shot, 2 shots, the close up, kind of by the book. And when you're running behind on time, to buy the book, all the tight shots go. You just stick to your 2s and the wider shots, and you can see that on this episode. If you think you're usually you get tighter and tighter as you go in and back and forth, and you'll end up all these scenes where you're kind of on a 2 shot with someone in the background, and then you cut to the next one and you think they were pushing it. And it says a lot for him that he was able to get this whole thing shot as the set was flooding.
He's a pro.
And then you can tell it was a tough day for that. I came on my character. There was a whole dialogue scene. I guess the role was first learner, but they called our group the Bickersons because our group just argued a lot. Very pleasant thing. Yeah. But that scene was supposed to film first, and they said, no, we're running late. We're just going to go right to the holodeck. And we did the mud bath in the holodeck. And I think originally all of us were supposed to be in the mud bath a great deal, but they hadn't done the previous stuff, and they didn't want to get the costumes all muddy. So they just passed out. And then they were running so far behind on things. They said, you know what, we're cutting this section here. And that happened to a number of characters and scenes, I understand.
Christopher, actually, before we get too deep into all of this, because there's a lot going on here and it's all very interesting. But before we go into that too deeply, I want to get a little bit of background on you, because you told us something right before we recorded to let people know, who you are and where you come from. You were originally up for the role of
Chakotay at one
Were
point.
you already a Star Trek fan? Did you know anything about Star Trek?
Yeah, I had. My dad was in rocket design. He worked on the Redstones and Friendship 7 programs. So in Enterprise, when those rockets are going up, I always go, that's one of my dad's projects. I had a big Friendship 7 logo above my crib when I was born.
Wow.
Which we'd watch the original series together because Laughing came on and then Star Trek after that. And if you didn't bug my dad, he would let you watch it. But he would always shut it off. Commercials, he would turn toward you and say, "Okay, did you see what that phaser did? They fired it and it went slow. Let's talk about general relativity right now because that shouldn't happen." And he would lecture about the physics of what was going on. Things would bug him. But that was the kind of the way we bonded. And then I was a chemical engineer in college and into the first 3 years, and I always liked science and always a big Trekkie. And then this was Cost of Living was my first time on the Star Trek set.
And what was it like auditioning for Chakotay real quick? Because that definitely piqued my interest there.
Well, it was very fair. Junie Lowry Johnson was great. And I had worked with her. I played the Jem'Hadar first for What You Leave Behind, earlier number of
last episode of Deep Space Nine, yeah.
Yeah, last couple, yeah. And she called me in, and I have a great grandmother, Rosa Zapata, off the reservation in Arizona, and which put me in the running for this. But they had a lot of.
So the Native American background was a big thing for them.
Was a necessity. And I'd never have, I've done a lot of, I stunt ride. I grew up riding trick riding on horses, and I've stunt ridden for a lot of Native Americans. And there's some very kind of strict rules in Nosotros, the Mexican American, Latina group of what you should be genetically past ancestors and stuff to work. And Star Trek was very, very upfront about that. And although I have time I've spent on the reservation, and I have a mixed growing up in very different cultures, I tried to be really upfront on that. And I was glad, because understanding how they wanted to swing this and how they were going to very, very strict influences, I think I recommended them that it could be a difficult thing. And I think it was. I think the concept of some of the Maquis was a difficult thing for Star Trek. But I think it was my third audition that I didn't get a call back on. It's the first time we went to producers. And those things that happened that could have gone one way or the other. I still enjoyed watching all the series very, very much.
Third audition's pretty good, though. You got pretty far. I
did. It was good. It was good. First time I came in, I do a lot of work up into high school. I had really long hair. When I finally, my folks said, time to cut that off and whatever. So I had it saved. And my agent said, you know what? At least show them what you do. Because most of the pictures you have were culturally, I say antique styling. What was 1890s, 1880s for most of the horse work. And they said, for a futuristic thing, go ahead, show them what you have, but really try to listen to what they want, which was really out of the ordinary. If you think about it, we're talking about a futuristic Native American. How do you tie those together? And I'm not sure they exactly knew themselves, but they were very intent to try to make it work. And I wish them well, because that's still a difficult thing to do in mainstream America.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I can see a lot of the things, the elements of, who they actually ended up going with for Chakotay. I can see some of those traits in you, and you have a very signature voice as well. Your voice, I was going to ask if you've ever done radio or voiceover work, because it's so easy to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
If I stop drinking water for a few days, it all gets like this, and then it all.
Well, don't stop drinking water.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so we sidetracked you a bit from talking about this episode, but now I just wanted to make sure everybody knew kind of, who you are, what you do. But let's dive into this episode. I remember seeing it a couple times before. This is Sirach's first time seeing it. And I remember the first thing I thought was, oh, It's the mud bath episode. So let's take a deep dive, pun intended, into the mud baths. How did that? Was there an interview process? Or can you tell us about like the makeup and the wardrobe, because it was nominated for 2 Emmys, one for makeup, one for wardrobe, and you're one of the people in makeup and wardrobe. Can you tell us about any of that?
And the wardrobe that I wore, which was this wonderfully intense lavender orange, skin tight, revealing everything in the world. They said, you know, come in a unitard, and I happy for that. And I guess the word, it's in some Star Trek museum now. Someone sent me a picture. It's like, oh, it's your outfit in a museum somewhere.
What?
I've got it somewhere. It's very dramatically lit and everything. But yeah, they went out, and I know that originally tied in during the bickering. They asked if I could juggle, which I could, which is what I came in on, but they didn't end up filming that scene. They ended up using the same outfit in a different episode later on. He's a world juggler. So they since they didn't film it for the cost of living, they used that for a different episode. I couldn't offhand say what it was, but
they did have a world juggler in this episode, but it might have been a different kind of situation. And by the way, I need to correct myself. It wasn't 2 Emmy nominations. It was 2 Emmy wins for this episode. So sorry, please continue.
It was an interesting episode in that there are, you know, Star Trek, especially TNG, can be, you know, high-minded stories of moral guidance and intergalactic turpitude and what is the question of right and wrong. And I'm not really sure that this episode is that one. This is, and you think about it. I mean, this is Major Barrett having lost her husband just a few months earlier,
right?
And I did get to watch her deliver her her speech on loneliness in this, which I think is a highlight of it. I happen to like that speech very much, and it really dealt with what Alexander was going through. So it was not science fiction, high and mighty, let's solve the great problems of the world. This was kind of intimate characters, what characters are going through. And you know, Luxana Troy, love her or hate her, she's an incredible character. You don't have many of those written in the world. And very much like you mentioned going at the mud bath. You come into the mud bath, and there was the whole group already in the bath, and it was great because Major Barrett was kind of holding court. She was talking away, and she was delightful, and everyone was having kind of a rough afternoon. And I remember her comment. She said, "I love this mud. It'll be great for my skin. I'll look just like number one."
Oh, and cool.
Which was a great line, you know. It's just, you know, and someone said, "Number one, what's that?" One of the other characters, and she was kind of this pause, and she went, "It's another character I played," and to which the other person said, "Oh, you've been on this show before," which was just great kind of silence, and just in classic Major Barrett, she said, "Yeah, a couple times." She goes, "They keep me around," which was just you just want to go, what class?
Well, if you stay in that mud long enough, you're going to look like a number 2 more than that.
Hey, Rock Lofton, everybody.
She said, "Yeah, they keep me around, and besides that number one thing," she goes, "it was just a pilot," which was just great, which was perfect when you realize that was their pilot for the show that she played that character. So yeah.
What was her demeanor, though? You said she was holding court, so was she? She wasn't as down as everyone else was with the weather and whatnot, and the circumstances. You kind of are depicting her in a more uplifting, positive way.
Positive way. She was upbeat. She was sitting in the center and enjoying making the most of everything, and she made it very pleasant. Talking to everyone and asking people questions, and keeping the attitude up. And I remember she had a cup. They didn't get the cup dirty. They didn't want the lines to go above certain levels. That's why they didn't put us in the mud as well, because they had to clean costumes later on if they were going to reuse them. But so a lot of technical stuff when you're dealing with a 3-foot deep mud bath. And she was a professional the whole time. She kept things just talking away. And of course, she had been for that group. It was the group coming on the set there, but she had been there for days. So for someone who could have been had enough with all the rain and the flooding and stuff, she kept things upbeat and was absolutely marvelous. It was neat.
Wow.
And I wonder about the mud as well, because usually when you're in between takes and they're saying, okay, we're going to get this shot, you've got to dip yourself into that mud into the height level that the camera wants. And then we've got to get multiple takes going, right? Because we're going to, try to get a printable take. And then at some point, we are going to change the camera angle for different coverage.
Which could take forever.
Are we staying in the mud, or are we coming out and getting
staying in the mud? Staying in the mud the whole time.
That's
it was hours sitting in the mud. Yeah. And it was one of the you think to a writer just right. They are in a mud bath. It's just a simple.
Yeah.
But there is a lot involved in that.
That's like 4 hours in the mud. That's not. It's not like 30, 15, maybe 20 minutes. That's hours. I mean, it could potentially be.
You have just made something very difficult, and it's not like a scene where you can walk around and shake out, and you are stuck in the mud. Yeah.
I was also thinking about bathroom break. At some point, I mean, I would be like, are they just using outhouses because they don't want to take mud with them, inside, or what's going on there? Don't need an answer for that. It was just, and I was also thinking about the blocking initially, how do they know the height for Alexander? When you said 3 foot deep, I was thinking they probably had the stand-in sitting in there before they added the mud, it would seem, so that they could get the right apple box for Alexander to sit on, the right levels possibly. And then they go, okay, here's our line. I was just trying to figure that out. I don't think you were there for any of that, but did you get any impression of logistically how they kind of worked all that out?
Well, I know that the whole scene was elevated, although it might look as if it's a mud bath in the floor. It was, everything was built 3 or 4 feet off the surface of the studio set. So it probably made it fairly easier for the cameras to be right at that level where they wanted. I'm sure if they hadn't used all the apple boxes in the hallways to have people think a place to walk on in the rain, the spare ones were probably underneath them to get to be just the right height in that mud, which was very exact. And they didn't want a lot of, the old thing of you have a drinking glass with a certain amount of liquid, and please don't make it go up and down.
Yeah.
It's like, please don't dip arms and limbs into the mud. Please, keep that straight. We have to shoot through this.
This poor guy's had to sit like this the whole time. I noticed that too.
There were a lot of arms up on the kind of the benches around this thing. I don't want to put them down here.
Yeah.
Or don't rub your face or things like that.
Oh my God, this is a mud disaster. I do have a question, because this episode won the Emmys for makeup and wardrobe, and I wanted to ask you about your experience working with, the legendary Bob Blackman and also Mike Westmore.
Both Bob and Mike were there when I was the Jem'Hadar first, because I remember them. They had a great talk on. They were like, you know what? Let's give them a bunch of forehead stuff. Where's our box of forehead stuff? I don't think they used the word stuff, but they ended up bringing a big box of former Jem'Hadar horn spike thing pieces, and they went bigger all in here on all the crusting. And they were like, yeah, I think that's good. And it was a very kind of enjoyable, they were both in there working. It was a more developed makeup than than usually was done for the Jemadar. They said it was the last big episode thing. And if you look, there is a trading card for some game. One of my younger sons gave me as a birthday present, and the Jem'Hadar pictured is my character.
Wow, really?
Kind of fun. It's like, thanks, that's a good one. And then there's a big book on all the Star Trek characters listing, and I just think it's because they used that Jem'Hadar first because they did a good job of really doing all the detail and crest work on it. Right. So it was fun. I mean, other than you're talking like this, all the difference was all the cresting. So I think that's why
nailed it. So before you did that role of Jem'Hadar, you didn't drink water for a few days, I guess.
I want to ask you because I can't help but notice it. Captain Picard, if I'm not mistaken, he keeps a model ship somewhere in his office or quarters, and I see you've got some model ships behind you. So I wanted to get into a little bit about your experience, teaching, tall ship sailing, as you called it.
Yeah, I've always sailed. I had an uncle who introduced. I think I was 6 or 7. And he had a little wooden boat, called a flat bottom that you could go along beaches. And I fixed it all up, and I re-rigged it from a simple sloop into a big top squaresail cutter. All sorts of extra sails I put on it.
God, I'm already lost. This is such a science.
And I loved it. I always loved sailing wooden ships. And I would go out up in the Oregon area, sail on the rivers and across lakes. And I loved star lore. And I am fascinated with the fact that you can look up at the sky and see where you are. Mm-hmm. And I teach navigation at the Los Angeles Maritime Institute. And I can teach, nowadays everything can be handled with GPS and a sextant if you need it, and simple work. But I love what I call it navigation without numbers for school kids. Although I work it into the world of trig, they just don't know that in the very beginning. But to teach kids when you're voyaging that you can be on a boat, and whether it's daytime with sun angles, water swells, water refraction angles, or at nighttime, I call the vault of the heavens, where you can spot. Everyone knows, you'd say the North Star, but what are the other stars doing, and how are they rotating over? And if you understand how that happens, you can be in the middle of the ocean with no land, and you know your directions. And it's a marvelous thing to teach someone, because it gives you a sense of how you fit on this planet and in the solar system and in the universe in general, which is an awe-inspiring thing. And the fact that through thousands of years, sailors and navigators have figured out how to use things, whether it's something as simple as a compass, or this is it's a Viking sunstone, a Zonstein, and it's Icelandic feldspar. And for the longest time, we'd read about these things in the Nordic sagas, and we didn't quite know what they were. And then a couple of them were found in the wreck of the Mary Rose when it sunk during the reign of Henry VIII. And it's a birefractic crystal. So I don't think the camera will show, but if I show here, so I put a single dot, it's a little bit of pine tar on the side. But if I hold it up here, you'll see 2 dots.
Oh yeah.
So it splits light into 2 at 90 degrees. And what that means is I can go out on a cloudy day in the morning, and I can, especially if I wrap it in leather, keep it here and wrap it, bring it up, and look, as I go to one side of the sun, the inner dot gets darker and the further one outside gets lighter, and I can go and I go, there's my sun right there. Boom, there's east. And that there are these techniques that people learned to be able to navigate, and usually with different devices, different things that culture has developed, and oftentimes languages and symbols, which is one reason I love Star Trek, because Deep Space Nine, especially when we're dealing with Bajoran culture and an archaic throwback, whether it's various stones or things from the temples, that cultures develop these things to explain their culture. And in terms of navigation, that's where it is. That's what happened. That is, every culture has developed stories to explain how to get from one place to the other. Oftentimes, they simply become stories, and people forget that it's a story to navigate by. And oftentimes, by figuring out what the original story is, it opens your eyes. Oh, that's how you use this particular device, or how you get from here to there, which sometimes is a very difficult thing. But cultural navigation, whether it's Polynesian sailors heading across using star triangulation, or Odysseus trying to get home to Ithaca, is told.
This reminds me a lot of my favorite Deep Space Nine episode, Explorers, because Sirach and Avery, they basically did that. They read about this lore, these stories, and they said, "Can we do this? Can we replicate?" And this is kind of what you're talking about here. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely,
exactly. And that is one of my favorite episodes, because the bonding that occurs in that episode, and the fact that you rediscover something that was lost, and that feeling of being tied into something bigger. That is what, to me, on an old wooden ship, is what it's all about. I love that episode. Without doubt, that it's my favorite Deep Space Nine episode, Explorers.
Yeah, and also to tie in a little bit more what you were saying, just to put a bow tie, that artifact that you just showed us, this Viking artifact, that basically is used to separate light. Somebody had to find out and discover that was the case, that this piece of stone, this crystal, has that ability to break the light that way, and then to use that particular thing as something to help navigate. So all of that talks about problem solving and ingenuity, which is another theme that you see in Star Trek. How do we solve this problem in front of us? And in a simple case of just figuring out how to reflect light and refract light, you're able to problem solve and say, oh, this is how we can do it. And I just think it just speaks to how, throughout time, whether, it's the inventions of all of these different ideas and principles of gravity and mathematics, and how we've advanced ourselves, we've always gone back to these simple ways of discovering, problem solving tools to get past whatever hurdle we have at that immediate time.
You can figure it out, and then someone finds a way to display it, to teach it to someone else.
And again, to speak to you, the rediscovering of that, I might find that little piece of crystal and not know that that's what it's for, but to rediscover that is the purpose behind it, gives a whole nother meaning to the generation that has that knowledge, that understands the history of that artifact. To also speak to your point about rediscovering Bajoran artifacts.
Mm-hmm. You say you because you mentioned that we bring a lot of old tools on our ships with us, and kids work with them, and they work sometimes for a week with things. And there was one that found it was a stone like this, and they found it has a refraction index. It's different from the side, and they were showing that you could see the refraction index on the water, which is the Polynesians would use that refraction index as well. And suddenly we found out that one of these, and it would, if you on the side of the stone, that little cross line, we started putting those on there because it shows from the horizon where the refraction index is. And it was a 9-year-old kid who showed us that, just because working with these for for 4 days. And he went, what's the rainbow thing that keeps showing up there? And you're like, so it's bringing it out there, getting it out there, and experiencing it. And when you do, suddenly you notice something different.
Absolutely. That is just absolutely fascinating. Wow. Christopher, thank you so much for hanging out with us. By the way, the Los Angeles Maritime Institute is in San Pedro, California, right at the southern tip of LA, basically in between Palos Verdes and Long Beach. So definitely, everybody, I'm practically signing up right now just hearing you talk. Everybody, you got to go. If you're in the area, definitely this sounds like it's something. Do you do any online courses?
Yes, we do. We have well, most of it's for school. We started it all during COVID when we went online. We have every month there are crew volunteer trainings. There's one this Saturday where in the beginning you learn how to coil lines, you learn how to climb masts, you learn calls and response, and then we have navigation, engine rebuilding, sail repair. By the end, if you went through a full course, you could finish. We have options at the Port of Los Angeles. It was a great big freighter that came in about 3 months ago, and someone with a bullhorn on the catwalk yelled, "Ahoy! Actually, returning from Singapore, Maritime Institute, class of '97." And it was someone who now is a mate on a boat and travels and sails around the world. So it's a wonderful experience. Doesn't cost you anything. And you can go sailing anytime you want.
That's incredible. All right. Well, everybody at home, check it out. Los Angeles Maritime Institute. Christopher Halstead, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has been awesome. So glad you made it for us. Really appreciate it. Everybody, stick around. We've got way more to review on this episode. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach frickin' Lofton.
Hello.
Hey, who did you play on Street Fighter? Who was your guy?
I use.
You seem like a Blanca guy.
I did everybody though, because I would use Ryu and Ken. Obviously, those were the basics. I did Zangief.
He was fun. He was like the toughest one to master, but somehow, like once you did master it,
I used all their moves. His move was to grab you, spin you,
do a 360 power bomb pile driver. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why that popped
somebody and did a circle. Press the buttons. That's when you got it.
Yeah, Dalsim was cool too. Yoga Flame, Yoga Fire.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, that was such an awesome interview. Very big special thanks to Christopher Halstead for that. Here are the trivioids of the week. An asteroid core is on a collision course with Tessin 3. Alexander was supposed to put his soiled clothing in the garment reprocessor. Alexander likes to go to the holodeck to fight his alien monsters. Life's true gift is the capacity to enjoy enjoyment. Agreed. Loaxana Troy loves the Parallax colony on Shiralea 6, I think it was. Loaxana Troy exposed Deanna to all sorts of mixed messages when she was a child. Loaxana got Petrokian sausage when all she wanted was tea. And that one guy wanted a little A. Anyway, so Sirach, what do you think of this episode? I'll be honest. I told you I'd seen this a few times before. I was never a big fan of the Alexander episodes. I was never a big fan of the Loaxana episodes. So you can imagine when, young Ryan was watching this episode, I was like, ugh. They're sitting in a mud bath. Loaxana's getting married. But I'll be honest. Ha! But then watching it today, I was like, this is actually a really fun episode. And I really enjoyed the dynamic between Alexander and Loaxana. It felt like the dynamic of grandson and grandmother to me, which is such a special relationship. And it reminded me of my grandmother in a lot of ways. But this was your first time seeing it. Where were you on that spectrum of love to hate?
Oh, yeah. I'm not the biggest Alexander episode guy myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, the problem with Loaxana's character is that the way the writers wrote her and the annoyance that Picard has with her and subsequently how Troy feels about her, that trickles down to the viewer. If Picard, the captain, can't stand her, is annoyed, and her own child is like, oh my God, my mom's here, I can't deal with this. So for me, like, how am I going to be like, what's the problem? Like, I'm all good with it. You know what I mean? I'm going to have the same energy as them.
Yeah.
And it almost sets me in that tone too, unfortunately, because I'm like, I'm cheering for my main characters in this show. So I'm cheering for Picard and Troy and Worf and everybody. So when she comes in and everybody that I cheer for is now like, oh God, I got a headache and a burden to deal with. I feel the same burden myself. Now, having said that, that I believe is the writers putting that on her. That's nothing to do with her performance and how they're writing her character. She is performing it the way they ask her to perform it, which is the annoying kind of mom, the pushy, the very sexually promiscuous, flirtatious on Picard. And so those characteristics going to, ignite those feelings of nagging and annoyance. Now, having said that, I think Majel is a fantastic actor when giving the right material. When the opportunity comes to be vulnerable, she is amazing. When she shows a weakness, when she shows that she's not the tough exterior that she pretends to have, which is, in control of every variable and situation and always, uh, in charge. I think that when she is able to get into this mode and in this moment in which she's showing a side of herself that's vulnerable, showing a side of herself that is afraid and mostly afraid of aging and getting old and not having the same kind of appeal to people that she feels like she has grown up her whole life having. So I think with that opportunity, she nailed that in this episode. Uh, I thought that was great about it. The part that I didn't really get with that much is the Alexander part. And I guess what I don't like about the Alexander part is when you as a parent are dealing with it, issues with being a parent and trying to raise your kid and do the best you can, and then you seek counseling, which is what he did in this particular moment from Troy. You're seeking counseling, you're trying to rectify this situation, and then a third party comes in like she does without any real background knowledge, history, what's going on. She doesn't know that this boy lost his mom. She doesn't know that his grandparents basically gave up on the responsibility. So there's a whole lot of stuff there that she doesn't know.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, come with me and we'll just go do whatever I want in this Holosuite program. Now, I think that's where I have a problem with it, because as a parent, you want to know what your child's going to be exposed to, right? And I think that place, that particular location that I saw with half naked women walking around, and it didn't seem like the child friendly place that I would want you to take my kid.
One lady wasn't even half naked. She was basically just painted naked.
Yeah,
you're right.
She was naked. Yeah. And I paused it and rewind. And by the way, that's probably what they won the Emmy for, because the makeup job on her was unbelievable.
Side note, actually, the pink and purple and white were pretty freaking amazing. Like the color scheme and all. Like, all joking aside, I was like, wow, that's really good, actually.
Well, I think she had some clothing on, and the some of the fabric from the clothing that she had on was camouflaged into her skin texture. So they actually put pieces of this kind of mermaid textured, I forgot what the iridescent, kind of looking texture.
Check out the $5 word on Ciroc right here. Iridescent. Yeah, good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought that was fantastic. The makeup job on her was fantastic. It was, I mean, literally from head to toe.
And the guy with the kind of the ring around his head too. It looked kind of almost bony or cartilagey.
But the question is Alexander, is this age appropriate for him? And I don't know that it is. And based on my experience, that's something at least you get permission from the parent for and say, hey, I'm going to take him to the, Disneyland place that we go to, that place, right? With the guy with the bubble. And then he can decide, you know what, I don't want my kid going over to take mud baths with a bunch of,
weirdos.
weirdos that I don't know. And so
Fun weirdos.
Okay, but still,
Yeah.
it kind of gave me like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory vibes. I don't know, the Willy Wonka type vibes
Yeah.
when she walked in there. I was like, oh, this place is like Willy Wonka. Was there candy canes growing on the trees and stuff? You know? So I did get a Willy Wonka vibe when she took him there. But the problem was Willy Wonka had a fun, playful kid vibe. There's little those dwarves were walking around, and the Oompa Loompas were there, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean. It was
blueberries and chocolate
blueberries,
everywhere.
chocolate rivers, and bubble gums and gobstoppers, and it was more of a kid-friendly place to say, okay, this is a cool place to take a kid. Now, if there were strippers walking around, I'd be like, hey, whoa, what the heck? This is not.
And you're right that it doesn't seem like Luoxana Troy is the kind of person that asks for permission. Maybe she just doesn't know much about boundaries. Because remember, like that's her problem with is boundaries. She reads people's minds without their permission. She dips into things. She shows up uninvited. She takes somebody's son, even though the son doesn't have permission from the father or the parent. She's inappropriate with her daughter in a lot of ways, just kind of talking rudely to her, or so she just has a problem with barriers. Now, I can see what they were doing with this, making her charming, and she's fun, and she has so many great likable qualities as well. But I see what you're saying, which is if you make a character that isn't good with boundaries and is kind of rude and inconsiderate and inappropriate to our main characters, it makes it tough to like them, even though you absolutely love the actress portraying the character. And so that's kind of where I've been in my whole life with this, which is like, I love Majel Roddenberry. I love this. And I love that they made a character for her so that she could keep coming back, and they made her the ship's computer, and she's just amazing. But it was, the episodes with the character kind of grated on me sometimes. Sometimes they were great, sometimes they're cool, but it was tough.
It would have been better the other way around, to be honest with you. It would have been better if Picard liked her, and it got out that he liked her, and he didn't want to tell her, but it got out somehow.
Yeah.
And then now she knows, but he never came forward with it. And there would have been a nice playful thing between there, where he gets embarrassed because, you know what I mean? She's kind of playing hard to get, as opposed to, it would have been better. She's playing hard to get.
Now, at the same time, though, sorry, were you still going? Sorry.
No. That was
at the same time. Not to bash too much myself, because I've been kind of bashed on it for 30 years, but about these episodes. But like this time, I did notice something that I found to be super charming, and I touched on it before, which is the relationship between Alexander, whom she called Little Warrior, which I thought was cute. I didn't catch that before, or I didn't care. I was like, oh, they're trying to create this kind of relationship, but I don't care. I want to see Klingons and laser beams when I was a kid, But now, again, I saw my grandmother, my Spanish grandmother in this, that would always be like, oh, let's do something fun. Let's go play tennis, or grandmothers a lot of times, or grandparents just in general, they're the ones where they can kind of break the rules. Like the parents got to make the rules, but the grandparents are fun. And then when the kid gets fussy, they go, here, take your fucking kid back, whatever. And so I saw that relationship, and I'm sure that's what they were going for. And shockingly to me, it actually worked for me. I was like, wow, this is a really cute relationship when they were talking. And when he was saying like, why are you getting married? Boy, you must really like him. And they're kind of learning from each other in a way. Now, obviously, she's wildly inappropriate and he's a bratty kid. but together, their relationship was actually very nice, I thought, Not their relationships with everybody else, but with each other. Totally worked for me.
Well, that's because you have finally two characters that you actually have a slight dislike towards, now actually finding common ground, and you're like, actually, I like their relationship, because that makes sense to me. The two of them, because one's bratty and the other one's kind of oblivious.
A Klingon.
And
No, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, I think there's some elements of this relationship that do work. I did like the honesty when the kid said to Alexander says to Luoxana, she says, "Are you very old?"
That
And
was funny.
it it was funny, but it was also like there's an innocence when kids say stuff. Okay, he's not trying to say anything bad.
Out of the
He just,
mouths of babes. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very innocent question that he genuinely is asking, not like trying to be some kind of
Mhm.
you know,
And
question that is
it's
hinting
set
at
up
something.
the
Yeah,
moment that I pictured when you were talking about, when you were saying earlier how when they give her something great to work with, vulnerable and all that, she's really good. When you were talking about that, this was the moment I was talking about, because they gave her the close up
yeah,
and she didn't just throw the line out. She paused, she felt it. We felt it with her. There was a lot more than just
and that's what she gave.
am I getting
That was
right. There
yeah,
was a lot
that's
more
what
than
she.
just am I getting old going through that head. There was a lot going through there. And yeah, it just to your point, that's where she had her magical moment, I thought.
Absolutely, and her line was, "I am alone, Alex. When you do get older, you can no longer pick and choose what comes your way." And we, as I get older and people get older, they'll learn for themselves
Mhm.
what that means for them. You know, but yeah, when you're young and everything's coming your way, and job opportunities or relationships, you're in one relationship, you're in another, you're flying all over the place, and you feel like you have unlimited options, right? You're getting letters from different colleges, whatever the thing is, where it's just like you have a choice. And the older you get, the less that choice becomes available to you, and you start to become set in your ways. You start to become judgmental about certain things, or whatever the case may be,
Mhm.
which limits and narrows your scope of potential candidates, of opportunities, whatever they are in front of you, right? You can no longer just be anything. You can only be really a data technician or a lock. You know what I mean? Whatever you put your life into
Yeah.
at that
And
point. So
they did cut out the line where when he said, when she was saying you can't really pick and choose, she says, really, all I care about is that he puts the toilet seat down. That was, but they ran out
they
of time.
they ran out of
She's like,
time
at
for
this point, if
the
he just
flood.
keeps the toilet seat down, that's a winner for me.
That's all I need.
Okay, so we're already out of time. We talked way too much because this was way too much fun. But it's the time for the home run of today's episode, Sirach Lofton.
Um, okay. The hands down best moment of this episode is Luoxana Troy's speech
Mhm.
when she has that moment. And that's when I think she gives her best performances. I don't like the whole everything's happy on the exterior, bouncing around stuff that she does in her normal. I like this version of her when she tunes into this really serious version of herself and takes things seriously. Um, so I'm going to say that Major Barrett Roddenberry deserves the home run. Now I'm going to give an honorary home run for the guy who I thought really blew my mind how well he does this. And that's Geordie LaForge, LeVar Burton,
With
and
the
his
techno.
techno babble. This was high level techno babble in this episode. It
I
was
couldn't even, I didn't even know what the
high
hell he was
level.
talking
Me
about.
neither. Me neither. And at some point, I was like, he's got to be reading. There's no way he's memorizing this. He's got to be reading it.
I
It's
don't know.
hard to even read it on a piece of paper. If I were to just write it down and say, recite this, it's not easy to get it out naturally.
Tongue
You would
twisters.
be reading tongue twisters and stuff. You're like helium lock, compressor valve. It's not natural in your brain to know what your hell you're talking about. And he spits it off like such golden magic. It's amazing. So yeah, he gets the honorary home run for Technobabble. Majel gets it for the most poignant moment.
Yeah, that's my guy right there. I agree with you. For me, it's Majel Roddenberry for the reason that you mentioned. I hadn't even thought of Jordy because to me, I'm always like, that's my guy. That's my guy showing off again, being
he is
awesome.
amazing. He is.
Uh,
There's nobody better.
I'm with you there forever. Okay, here are other people that are with us forever. Dr. Anne-Marie Seagull, Eve England out in Wales, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Yvette Blackman Tom, Titus Moeller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, a.k.a. Crewman Guy, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Chris Sternick, Greg K. Wickstrom, Cassandra Gerard, Chuck A., Chris Garrison, of course, Jason M. Oken. I tried to rush through those. Here we go. Free for all up next. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Laughing Hour with Sirach Lofton. It's also the free for all with Melissa Longo, of course. And Jason M. Oken, professional giggler. Allison Leach Hyde has her disco shirt. Cassandra Gerard has the coolest name in showbiz. Is this showbiz? I don't know. Greg Kenzo's out in Hawaii. Chuck A has cool stuff on his wall. TJ Jackson Bay and Faith Howell are on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Carrie Schwent is in Iceland. I don't know. Did I get that really? Man,
yes, you did.
Good.
Wow.
The land of ice and fire. Mark Zutkoff is here. He's got some cool pictures in his background. Chris Garris has that one guy. I forgot what the guy's name was, the checkerboard head. So does the Matt Boardman, and Chris McGee has the cool ISO linear chip shirt. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I'm going to say 6.4.
What?
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
I'm going to say 6.9.
6.8.
You
This is
would.
this is an IMDb guess. Yeah, 6.9, 7.
7.3.
Oh, what does Faith say?
Something's just a 10. That's not a 10.
I think that was her William Shatner impression. All right, all bets are in. The answer, if I remember correctly, and Melissa will correct me if I'm wrong, 6.1. Wow.
Wow.
I think everybody overbid.
Yeah.
It's 5.8. So.
Okay.
You said 5.8. Oh, I missed that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I missed that too.
All right. Did we get any non-appearance mentions? I didn't. Wait.
Mm-hmm.
I got 2. Dr. Crusher.
Well, she was there.
Yeah, she's
When?
in one scene. She's in one
At the
scene.
wedding.
No
Right at
lines,
the
one
beginning?
scene.
Okay. So I missed
No,
her.
at the end.
At the end? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
She's in
wedding.
one
Oh,
scene.
okay. Right.
Sorry.
Right. Okay.
Then I got 1. Kalar.
Yep.
Alexander talked about his mom.
Yes.
Right.
he did.
Oh, duh. You're right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
He says how he misses his mom.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I had an almost one, which was when they say the chalice of Reeks, even though it's Ricks, I think. Because I'm like, well, there was that Captain Ricks who was like a Bolian guy, but I'm like, that can't be the same guy, so I guess that doesn't count.
No.
Mr.
They also
McGee,
said-
yeah?
Well, they said Bussard collectors instead of, well, they say Bussard, right? In every other reference.
Is that a character?
I don't know
know
who that's right.
Some people say potato.
It's just similar to what you were talking
They
about.
also said bodice, and I have no idea what that meant.
There is a certain technical aspect of said part of a ship which is not pertinent to our discussion today, I do declare.
Sorry.
Wayne.
Matt's drunk. Chris,
Man,
do
we're all
we have
drinking
a,
that, so-
Son of a gun, it is Friday.
do we have any some kinds of or some sorts of?
I think they were making it up for the last few episodes. We got 3 of them today. First, Geordi saying some kind of intermittent EM field pattern when he was scanning that junction in the quarter. Then Riker, when looking at that orange gloop, said some kind of corrosion.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, Geordi again, explaining to Picard, says, we must be dealing with a metal parasite of some kind.
Awesome. All right, Melissa Longo, we just said a lot of
Yeah.
weird stuff. Can you get us started off on the right track by telling us what you thought of this episode, please?
Yeah. I interestingly enough looked at IMDb before I watched this, so I wasn't expecting much. But I actually enjoyed this episode, and it's no surprise that Luoxana has not been my favorite character of the past. However, I really enjoyed her in this episode. I think that she stole the show in this episode. I loved her relationship with Alexander and how affectionate she was towards him. And I don't know, I feel like she's grown quite a bit, even though she's not here very often. We don't get to see her very often, but her character has definitely had some growth, which I really enjoy. And she's not hoisting herself or thrusting herself on people in this episode. She's going through a discovery just like Alexander is. And one of my favorite lines in this episode was, "The great secret is not the variety of life, it's the variety of us." And I love that. I love that. It's not a perfect episode, and so there are some nitpicks at the end, but I enjoyed Luoxana in this episode.
See. Thank you very much, Melissa Longo. And of course, your favorite quote matches your shirt. IDIC, very cool. You can get that at Walking Art made by Melissa. Jason M. Oken, what's up? What'd you think of this one?
Well, it's kind of interesting when I look probably at the entire season. You kind of see the peaks and valleys. You can look at it as a roller coaster. And for a couple of weeks or for several weeks, we're sort of on the high, and it seems like we're kind of going down in a trough here. Maybe it's my personal bias. It's never been one of my favorite episodes. Sometimes whenever it comes up, I cringe a little bit when I have to watch it. There are certain parts of it that, and again, that's just a personal thing. I don't stomach very well. I was not a big fan of that whole holodeck scene, backwards and forwards. I think it was a little too silly. All in all, I guess you have Enterprise menaced by pixie dust, which is probably not the most appealing of villains or adversaries. It seems like I know. It seems like I know what they're going for. They wanted to have a lighthearted episode, some sort of character development or personality or show work or what have you. But they needed to have the sci-fi element, which I think drags the episode down quite a bit. It's just not interesting. It starts out with somewhat of a bang. I mean, I think it's shot very well. That's one thing that sort of saves it for me a little bit. I think Rick Colby shot it very well. I think it's acted pretty much well. Again, there's a lot of humor in it, and I'm not sure the timing was exactly right for the humor. Something didn't quite work. The lines, the certain parts of dialogue, the dialogue that are interesting, that do make sense. Those lines make sense. But overall, I think frankly, it falls flat. There are a lot of things here that I can say, but it's certainly not at the top of my favorite episode list.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oken. All right. Allison Leach Hyde is here sporting her cool disco shirt. What do you think of this one?
It's a cute episode. It's a lovely relationship between Waxana and Alexander. And they're both kind of going through the same thing. Like, what are expectations? And how do I live with the expectations, my own or somebody else's? So I liked the juxtaposition of putting those two characters together, since one's so young and one is in the on the other side of middle age in theory. And so I thought that was nice, and they were so sweet together. I mean, you can just see that Majel really, really liked acting with Brian. Like, that was really sweet. And I love, all the hugs and things like that. Like, she's like, oh no, I have to protect this child because their father's Worf and he's yelling at him all the time. Oof. Like, he's a kid, he needs some silly. And so, I really liked that. I also really enjoyed Deanna calling both like calling both Worf and Alexander gentlemen, like putting them on, like she's treating them the same. They have the same value to her in this situation, and not like going the dad's more important or the kid's more important. They're both equally important in this relationship. And I thought that's what she was also trying to convey to Worf about, having a contract, as it were, is like, you are both important in this situation and you have to both equally want the other to succeed in what's going on. So yeah. Is it silly? Yes. Were the ears on Minister Campo kind of gross? Yes. Those got me whenever he was on screen. I'm just staring at him like, oh. So, and as always, Picard has really bad luck in turbo lifts. You should not get in a turbo lift with Picard when something bad might happen or is happening, because you're going to get stuck or the walls are going to melt, or it could be bad.
Thank you very much, Allison Leach Hyde. I also heard you're not supposed to get in a turbo lift with Riker, but for different reasons. All right. Cassandra Gerard is here. What did you think of that this episode, Cassandra?
So I thought it was fun. It's not one of my favorite episodes, but it's definitely not the worst either. I always do a deep dive for some reason to these Star Trek episodes. And so with the title Cost of Living, I broke it down to 3 sections in terms of, you have these alien parasites who survived after the Enterprise saved Tessin 3 from the Mausolina system. So they're just living their lives in space. So they just latch on to the nearest thing that they think is maybe an asteroid, and it's a ship. So they're fighting to survive. And then you have the compromising that's going between Worf and Alexander. Alexander is doing everything verbatim that Worf says, but he doesn't know how to read into it because Worf is always so strict. And then also in the same sense, Worf doesn't know how to parent as yet. He's still learning that aspect. So you have that struggle between the two of them. And then there's a settling that Luxana seems to be doing. And it's almost like back in the, I guess now would be internet dating, right? Like you don't really see anyone until later on. And sometimes you get catfished. But at the same time, Luxana is so much older and mature. And you thought that she would have done some research into their history and their marital customs. And she didn't seem to do any of that. She was like, listen, I'm older and I'm lonely. Let's just make it happen. And there are some cultures even today that don't meet anyone until the day they get married. So, but I thought that was just interesting because Luxana is such a sexual person and human being. And that as she's at this point in her life where she's like, I don't care what he looks like. I don't care what his customs are. Let's just get it over with. And so I thought that was interesting, but I loved how, and I'll say this for later, but at the end when she came through and she's like, and everyone was basically like, you know what, everyone's just gonna settle. Everyone's just gonna, not really settle, but everyone's gonna live up to what their expectations of who they are should be. And so I love that about this episode. And at the end, everyone got their due diligence.
Mm-hmm. Excellent points. Thank you very much, Cassandra Gerard. Greg Kenzo is nodding his head. I bet we will too when he tells us what he thought of this episode.
Yeah. Oh, so when I first started watching TNG, I think my first and only watch through was about 7 years ago. I don't remember a lot of this. I remember this episode. I remember not really liking it. Maybe I was more like Worf, where I didn't know maybe how to have fun, or I just automatically judged this. I was like, oh, they're doing the normal stuff they do. And but this time around, I loved it. It was just Luoxana was, first off, it was a cool way to start the episode. The only thing I really didn't like was, like Jason said, the B story, which was the main crew, or just the main, except for Crusher for some reason. Just not really there. And I guess they had to do that because there were people that loved TNG so much and they wanted to see the main group. So they kind of feel like shoved into this episode. Like it's not really, didn't need to really be there. But yeah, it's another in the long line of episodes that have an energy being take over, cause damage to the ship to allow for deck episodes to happen. I felt closer to Loxana in this episode. Her care for Alexander was endearing. Let's see. There was no mystery really to solve or objective to achieve. And I think that's why it has such a low score on IMDb. The much more of the episodes before this, were like, here's an objective to achieve. We got to solve it. This one sets the example for so many of the future episodes that I love. Let's see. It's Only a Paper Moon, Aaron Eisenberg, and Vic. They really don't do much in the. It's not a holodeck. It's a holosuite. But there's so much character development that you love it nonetheless. And they got rid of I don't think there's really a B episode. That's like the main focus of that episode. And so they did it right. But I understand that this had to come first. There's also, the philosophies. I got a couple of them. I wrote this note right before the guy said the line, "Every moment requires a purpose." So there's no mystery to solve or objective to achieve. And then the orange guy was like, "Every moment requires a purpose." And then Loxana says, "The great secret is not the variety of life, it's the variety of us," as she gestures to everyone around her. And it's such a profound statement that I missed the first time, because it's easy to judge people based on their profession or something similarly superficial. But to remember that everybody has hidden depths, and it's not just one or two things that define them, but she says we're made up of 1,000 little people. I love that. It's amazing. One nitpick, I'll be real quick because I'm going over our little limit, but I think that Loxana would have ditched this guy way faster. Like, she's such a feminist in my point of view before these episodes, that it just seems so out of character for this beautiful woman with a lovely personality being like hard on her luck and like accepting really just the worst person for her. But I understand that it's a plot device and it had to carry her to the through to the end. But yeah, love this episode. And Worf's reveal and tagline behind Melissa.
Yeah,
it was a perfect button to this episode.
Good stuff. Thanks very much, Greg Kenzo. We're all made up of a bunch of little people like Voltron. Chuck A, what did you think of this episode?
Mixed feelings about it. I liked it a little more than I had remembered in my earlier viewings. The holodeck scene was not real good. I thought it was a little overdone. Alexander and Worf arguing back and forth. It's been, played out in a few episodes already. Getting a little tiresome, but Worf, has had being said to be not so good a father. He did seek out, Troy's assistance again, which was good. Loxana had the one scene again, like in the episode Man Trap, where she talks to herself with the computer before she went to the holodeck. I think I don't know. I know of twice they did that. That was cool. Like what Melissa has in her background with "You just supposed to sit here." I just burst out in laughter. And it was just his head sticking out of the mud. In the last scene where Loxana comes in, for the wedding, it could be considered a sequel to the TNG episode "The Naked Now," for obvious reasons. Like I said, I loved the episode a little better than I remembered it, but still, I consider on the mediocre side.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks very much, Chuck A. He's very honest. TJ Jackson Bay, what did you think of this episode, though? You loved it, right?
I absolutely love this episode, and it didn't have to grow on me for me to love it. I always loved this episode. It's so endearing to watch Loaxana and Alexander together, and really watch the emotional journey that they're both going through. Alexander, feels so held down, and he feels like Worf is so strict, and and then, he goes to the counselor, and it's almost like, Counselor Troy is on his side, even though, she's trying to, put them on that equal footing. It just feels like he doesn't have anywhere to turn, and in comes Loaxana, and she just really kind of frees him, from that situation, gives him a little bit of relief. And so that's enjoyable for me to watch. And on Loaxana's side, she's also, kind of going through an emotional journey of her own. And we've seen this develop. Someone talked about her character development, even though we don't see her often, but this is 100% Loaxana, because she's always chastising Deanna about being married. So we know that that's very important to her. And the fact that she feels so lonely that she doesn't even care who this guy is. He's a warm body, and he said yes, and she's going along with it, and she's willing to give it a shot. Just really kind of shows where she is emotionally, and the fact that it takes her relationship with Alexander to just kind of bring it out of her that hey, I'm gonna be sad and miserable for the rest of my life like this. And for Alexander to see that and say something, I thought was just extremely beautiful. There were a couple of funny lines for me. One of those was in the quarters when I think Deanna is like chastising Loaxana, and Loaxana calls her deadly dull. I thought that was just hilarious. And the other line, it was in the holodeck scene, which it seems some people didn't enjoy. I loved the holodeck scenes, every last one of them. And so it was the guy with that was juggling. He it just says, "If you ever have a world, plan ahead. Don't eat it." I've never forgotten that line since the first time I saw that at this episode, and it's always funny. So I mean, I could talk about this episode all day, but I won't. But unless you come to things left unsaid, and then I'll talk about it all day probably. But yeah, this episode to me is just fabulous. I love the emotional journey. So I don't know if you felt that way about it. Maybe look at it again.
This guy gets it. TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. Thank you very much for that. Faith Howell. All right, Faith, did you love this episode as much as you love all of season 5? What'd you think?
I definitely love this episode. I mean, as mentioned before, I was 6 when this episode came out. So at that age, what is not to love about this episode? You get all of this sort of kiddie slapstick humor. You're getting a character who is relatable. And I mean, you get to see Worf in mud. There we go. That's episode all around right there.
That's what I'm talking
So yeah,
about.
I think some of the most memorable things from that age are definitely when Worf comes in and like punches the bubble guy. That was pretty awesome and hysterical. Worf in the mud. But I also just love Loaxana all around. I know, she's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think she just gets better and better every time we see her. She's just so charismatic, and I think it was funny. She didn't like the wedding dress, and it's gorgeous. I don't know if my taste or, the tastes of the time were different back then, but it is beautiful. I would love to have a dress like that.
Wait.
The
the original wedding dress. Okay, got it.
I mean, that one too.
I was going to say, I mean,
but yeah, I really did appreciate that as an adult to watching. It was a little shocking when I was 6 because, oh my God, naked people. But now I love that symbolism of her really just taking back herself and putting it all out there, literally, that this is who I am, take it or leave it.
And I'm kind of glad that that guy and his weird ears left.
All right. Thank you very much, Faith Howell. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear, in the aforementioned Iceland. But why? We can't hear you.
It's a long distance to travel.
Yeah. It takes a while.
No, so I had a neighbor blasting music, so I had it muted. But no, this is the Blue Lagoon geothermal resort in Iceland, about half an hour or so outside of Reykjavik. It is fantastic to visit. You never want to leave. The water is just so warm. It's so comfortable there. Even if the air is cold, you never want to get out because it's just very nice. I've never done a mud bath, but I would, given the opportunity, I would probably try one. The opportunity hasn't come up yet, but it looks just as relaxing as a Blue Lagoon behind me. And of course, we have the space dust from the episode. And who doesn't love glitter? I love, as a crafter, I automatically love glitter. I don't hate it as much as some people do, because I find it useful. If it gets everywhere, so be it. It adds sparkle to life. But so yeah, circling back to my notes, yeah, I love this episode so much. We all know how much I love Loxana. Nobody's relationship with their parents is perfect. Everybody has difficulties with it. I would not have married Campio either. Yeah, the earlobes were kind of gross, but I do love that actor. He's got such a great voice. Looking on his IMDb, like 3/4 of his acting credits are voice acting work, so he has done so much of that. But I know him from in front of the camera from Lois and Clark. He was Lex Luthor's valet Nigel in the first couple seasons of that show. He has got such a cool voice. And I looked it up. Ghostbusters 2 came out 3 years before this episode came out, and when they set the jar of goo on the desk in the observation lounge, I yell at the TV every time. Think pleasant thoughts, no negative thoughts, because then that stuff's going to start bubbling up. If you've never seen Ghostbusters 2, go watch it. You'll thank me later. I'm the first to admit, I think that the holodeck looks a little bit season 1-ish, but I don't hate it. I liked all of the people on there. I enjoyed the arguing adult versions of Thing 1 and Thing 2, because that's exactly what their hair reminded me. The hair and the jumpsuits reminded me of. I would totally hang out at that place. And like a lot of people, I thought Waxana and Alexander made such a fantastic pair. They absolutely were what each other needed. She needed someone other than Deanna to remind her that she needed to be herself and not settle. He needed some kind of female presence in his life other than Deanna, who is his therapist. And I love the fact that he's going to therapy, because especially after everything with his mom, I love that he's doing that. I love Worf supports him in that, and from the looks of it, joins him from time to time. I'm absolutely with Alexander in the scene. He's trying to get Alexander to eat dinner, where Worf's trying to tell him to stay and eat dinner, but Alex is like, I made a promise. You told me a word doesn't keep his word. Stop confusing me. That's a very important parental life lesson. Giving your kid mixed signals will confuse them. You have to, work with your child and not try to, Anyway, I'm babbling. He needed a calming female presence, someone to have fun with, somebody he could talk to, like talking to a grandmother. He needed somebody like that, because it can sometimes be hard to talk to your direct parent, especially one that yells a lot like Worf does. Worf stopping himself from yelling just makes me laugh every time. I too love Waxana's wardrobe every single time. That wedding dress was gorgeous. If Waxana doesn't want it, I will absolutely wear it. And her telling Alexander about all the people that live in your head, and some like to do this and some like to do that. I've been saying this for years. I even bought a T-shirt for my husband that says, "I do what the voices in my wife's head tell me to." He gets compliments on it every single time he wears it. And I do have like one fun thing and a story for things left unsaid. So I'll tease that. But for the poetry this time, I went a little bit different, and I was sort of inspired by the first learner. I think the IMDb credits have him as the guy all in orange, the higher the fewer guy. He sort of inspired me, and a little bit of Terry Farrell from the Delta Flyers. Her poetry is a little bit looser. So with that, I will end, or I will finish with this. All knowledge begins with wisdom. All wisdom begins with truth. Children learn from their parents. Parents learn from their children. The bottom, the end.
Nice. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. Mark Zutkoff, what's up? What'd you think of this one? Welcome.
Thank you. From my previous viewings of this episode, I only remembered the one famous line and not being thrilled with the story. Watching it now, my opinion of it has greatly improved. It's funny and touching with some of the best humorous dialogue in a TNG episode. Originally, I'd felt that they'd let Roxana's character backslide after her growth in Half a Life, but seeing it now, I disagreed with myself. Now, as long as I don't lose the argument, I should be all right. The technobabble-laden B-plot was a bit annoying, but I'll save the complaints about it for things left unsaid. It does seem like Roxana swiped right, although actually she swiped wrong. Majel Barrett as Roxana uses a variety of facial expressions that were so expressive. Later in the episode, she switches between humor and pathos in a single scene, shot in close-up so we can see the changing expressions throughout. Excellent. I liked the line from Roxana that capped the famous "the higher the fewer." That's a conversation stopper if I ever heard one. And Roxana adds a beautiful line to Alexander, "The mind opens and in creeps wisdom." We could use some more of that in the world. When Riker tells Picard that the honor of giving away the bride belongs to him, Picard shows some ego by agreeing to the ceremony when he'd been against it moments before, but immediately follows it with a hilarious line that nothing would please him more than giving Mrs. Troy away. Star Trek does the Marx Brothers A Night at the Opera famous stateroom scene. 7 characters in cramped quarters. All it was missing was somebody ordering 2 hard-boiled eggs. Partly through the earlier holodeck scene, I suddenly remembered how this episode ended, with Roxana coming to the wedding ceremony naked. But what made that scene work were the reactions of the attendees, among others Mr. Holmes' knowing smile, and a few moments later, Troy's grin. And then the mud bath at the end. My heavens, Deanna's hair. Not quite the higher the fewer, in this case, the higher the more. And finally, my home pun of the episode, the holodeck sequences were Star Trek's attempt at high campio.
Thank you very much, Mark Zutkoff. Everybody, you can get his TNG joke book at Barnes & Noble and walkingartmadebymelissa.com. Great stuff. Chris McGee is here in Southeast Texas. What's up, Chris? I'm sorry. Chris Garris. This is the second time. I'll never do that again. Chris Garris is in Southeast Texas. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, it was. When I saw what it was, I was like, great, another Alexander episode, because I know some people in this group feel the same way at times. But I had forgotten how it started, and changed my mind a little bit. Still, not my favorite episodes, but it's not as bad as I was expecting. Because anytime you get Roxana on the Enterprise, there's going to be grief. She's going to annoy Picard, or annoy her daughter. This time she decides to annoy Worf, and that's always the comedic. She's the comedic relief at times. But, I had kind of forgotten about, how she actually takes Alexander under her wing and honestly just helps him out to get through this, rough patch with Worf. Well, one of many rough patches with Worf, because this is not the only one. And I'd forgotten that it starts off with the way it starts doesn't even really show how the episode's going to be, because it's full of action. They're sitting there trying to destroy that asteroid. It's it looked like it wasn't going to be successful, but that's beside the point. I liked how we start with Troy's office with Worf and Alexander. She's actually trying to counsel them. They're sitting there talking about I was thinking it makes me laugh when Troy asks Alexander, what, in the contract, what one thing would he like from his father? And he says, no yelling. And Worf, I do not yell. And which it made me immediately think of, I'm not a married man. I just couldn't hear that in my head. And then I liked also when I've never seen somebody go from smiling to, oh, whatever, as fast as Deanna when she heard, oh, your mom's on board. Oh, she needs to go to some parent-child counseling for herself. And so I just like that. And also, I actually agreed with Deanna at first, when she was actually questioning Loxana about, who is this guy, because she's just worried about her mom, just basically doesn't want to get taken care of, taken advantage of, and it was cool to know that, online dating still exists in the 24th century. Wasn't expecting that. And Klingons can definitely roll their eyes, because when she calls him Mr. Wolf, his face, oh my God, look could have killed. And probably last thing I'll say for now was during the Riker and Picard walk and talk, there's only a few other times. The only other time Riker has such a smile on his face is when, he's probably going to be getting some, but he's getting to sit there and just spoon feed slowly to Picard about Loxana. And, someone else, said, he was like, God, she's on this ship. She can't do it. Yeah, but she wants you to give her away. Okay. Like, his attitude changed instantly. So, when it was all said and done, it just, the relationship between Loxana and Alexander really helps to fix, Alexander and Worf's, to find a balance, which also then allows her to, reconsider her marriage and just going back to being independent, which is the Loxana that we all know.
Wait, I like that. Roxana. Rocks. Yeah, she rocks. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, so it has grown on me, but like everybody else, it's, I won't necessarily just skip past it anymore.
Wow, you used to skip past it. Ouch. Thank you very much, Chris Garris. Definitely better this time around. Chris McGee in Cincinnati. What did you think of this one?
Well, like Chris Garris, this is one of the few episodes that I skip during a rewatch of the series. Not due to the story and the A plot of Loxana getting married, which is decent, or even the B plot of the asteroid sparkles or parasites. No, it's the side plot to Loxana's marriage. I might even call it filler of the holodeck visits. It's like watching a Teletubbies show. And apologies to anyone watching or listening who loves Teletubbies. I mean no disrespect. Those holodeck scenes just don't seem to mesh well with the tone of the rest of this episode. Like Carrie, Tony J is one of my favorite voice actors. His acting credits are too numerous to mention, but I've always loved hearing his voice in some of my favorite video games. despite this episode not ranking highly on overall on my list of good episodes, I do love that Majel's continuing to be given more dramatic scenes, like in her last appearance. And through her interactions with Alexander, you can clearly see just how good she is with children. One tiny little nitpick I'll squeeze in here. While I appreciate the decision to open the episode on an action sequence, I do have this one small nitpick. As Sirach has pointed out in previous episodes, when you only have 44 seconds to take action, that's really not the time to give detailed explanations. Couple of brief moments that caught my attention. The Spike Boglow from Code of Honor is seen on display in Worf's quarters. And Ensign J gets a nice little feature shot as she's helped off the bridge later on in the episode. My quote of the episode, everyone's pretty much covered every single quote that I wrote down, so I'll just go with my primary choice, which is Loxana, of course, saying, well, that's a conversation stopper if I ever heard one.
Thank you very much, Chris McGee, the conversation starter. All right, the Matt Boardman, what's up with you? What do you think of this one?
So again, like others, I think before this was not an episode that was in my top, like, okay, maybe I'm going to skip this one, right? But as is the case, a lot of times when you go back to it and circumstances in your life have changed, it means different things to you. And I mean, as a parent, and I think whether you're a parent or you have nieces and nephews that you deal with, everybody knows that there's a precarious relationship between kids. And adults, right? And I see this in my wife Rachel. She is a kindergarten teacher, and her descriptions of the interactions that she has with these kids there too. And I think it kind of is boiled down to reverse hostage negotiations. Because I mean, you are making deals to try to get these tiny little human beings to do the things that you know are for their betterment, but they don't always agree with you, right? They have their own independent thoughts. So I love that aspect of it, because Star Trek at its core is that allegorical tale. It touches upon those aspects of our life that in a unique way that isn't quite hitting us over the head with a frying pan, but as we are tuned into that particular message, it means something different to those of us depending on where we're at in our lives. But I also particularly like the situation with Loxana and getting married, because I know for myself personally, having been divorced and going through the whole dating life, like, I'm sorry, but dating when you are older sucks. It is bad. It is not fun. I do not recommend. 2 thumbs down. It is. It's just not fun. It's just. I mean, as we get older, we all have our issues, but some people have full subscriptions by that point, right? And so it's. I can sympathize with her, but what I'm more or less I love about her arc in this particular story is that for all of this advice that she's giving to Alexander, she doesn't stop for a moment to think, hey, maybe I should take my own advice. And as a parent who's had a lot of discussions with my son lately, about where he's going in his life, right? He's 19, he's going to be 20 years old this year, and he's constantly telling me, well, I'm a failure. I'm not doing anything. I'm like, bro, you're 19 years old, right? You're exactly where you're supposed to be. You just graduated. Like, if you were off, running some country or something like that, I'd be a little concerned, because already, you're supposed to have fun. And that's the message that she's trying to give Alexander. Well, as adults, we are supposed to have fun. Just because we're bigger, older, heavier, slower than what we should always have fun. And I love the message that this episode gives in that no matter where you're at in your life, the higher, the fewer.
Yep. Ain't that the truth? Thanks very much, the Matt Boardman. All right, Sirach Lofton, Jake's final take. Any final thoughts on this one? Why don't you unmute yourself? It happens to all of us.
That'll probably work better. Probably sound better. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that the word profiles was used, like, it's something that we use today when we're talking about online dating. So I thought that was interesting. That just the verbiage of it is something that really caught on. I love Mr. Holmes' outfits. I think he wears some of the best outfits in the world. He's got so much style. I don't know. It's kind of it's like it's just it has so many different flavors to it. Love the fabric choices and the drapes and how the clothes just like falls on him. So he must be a joy to dress for Bob Blackman and those guys. Um, yeah, I thought it was funny when Alexander, and I thought he had some very good moments in this episode. I thought it was funny when he said, "You told me that yesterday." Like, like that just holds for then. Like, you got to tell me again today. And I also liked it when he said, "I hate him. All he cares about are rules." They're like, yeah, wait till you get married. And so, and then, yeah, I've also thought it was funny when Majel orders her tea, drink, or whatnot, and she gets mad and she kind of hits the thing. And I thought we've all done that at a soda machine at one time where you just pissed at it and you just kind of hit it one time, thinking that that'll do it. So I like that. Luoxana had a great line where she said, "Minister, darling, perhaps you and the Jerko." That was a nice little, just subtle thing right there. That's exactly how she would do it. You and the Jerko. So, I thought about Data saving the day in this episode when everybody was passed out. I'm like, didn't he do that on the episode where the time loop situation and everybody was knocked out? I was like, where would they be without this guy? I literally dead. So thank God for Data. Yeah, I love the costume of the dancer woman that was in that holodeck. I mean, her body paint, makeup, it was just unbelievable. She would probably win any costume contest there is, just based on the intricacy of the way it looked to me. I saw fabric attached to her skin a little bit. But that's the same reason why I didn't like this episode, because I don't think it's appropriate to bring somebody else's kid to an environment that has that kind of sexual proclivity to it. And that disturbed me as a parent. I think you need permission in order to do that. Minister Campio had a cool jacket that also doubled as a toupee. So I thought that was that was awesome. Yeah, that's that's pretty much it for me. Overall, I did like the chemistry between the two. I thought the two pretty much characters that everybody hates or people hate or somebody dislikes right now actually teamed up together to be there for each other. And I've said this before, but I think Majel Roddenberry does her best acting when she's not over the top and she just has to be serious. And I think if she was written that way all the time, we would see some of the best performances from her all the time, because I do think she can hit those vulnerable, sensitive notes as well as anybody I've seen. And she kind of makes you tear up when she gets into that kind of self-pity mode that she was getting into in this particular episode. And you kind of felt for her character, facing time, father time, which is what she's up against, like all of us. So I think that was a beautiful opportunity for her to showcase her acting. I wish they did it more often and didn't make her so over the top as an annoyance to people. Because I think when she has the opportunity to really deliver a message and give you some kind of story or some kind of serious note, she's at her best. So, yeah, that's it.
Beautiful. That's it for us, everybody. Can you believe it? We just talked about this episode for like an hour and a half, and we had a ton of fun doing it. We actually had, you guys, the first learner join us in the first segment of this episode, and it was actually freaking awesome. Can't wait for you to see it. Thank you very much to the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Chris Garris, Mark Zutkoff, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, TJ Jackson Bay, Chuck A., Greg Kenzo, Cassandra Gerard, Allison Leach Hyde, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, for myself, Sirach, Melissa, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. We had a ton of fun. Leave your comments in the comments section below, and we'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.